Great. How about now? Can you hear me now? Oh, technical difficulties. Oprah doesn't
Yep,
have
it's
these
good now.
problems. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, I'll start over. All right. So thank you guys. You guys are amazing from around the world. I was saying earlier that I am filling out my map and I have pins from all over the world, which I think is so cool. And we have Mo here today. He is our model and he's from Syria. So we have Mo's from Syria, and I have never cut his hair before. We met out in an event, and I told him to come over. We had a consultation. It's been 6 weeks since he got his last haircut, and he told me that he wants to grow it out. And I think that's a really important conversation that we often have with our clients, especially if they're looking for change. If they want to grow it out, what does that look like? How can I help them grow it out? And how do I not lose them as a client and just say, okay, see you in 3 months while you grow your hair out? So, a couple of things that I want to point out. The first thing that I want to make very, very clear is that I never charge less. So, if I'm just kind of cutting in here and shaping it up, and maybe I don't even have to cut this area that much, does not mean I charge half price. I'm the expert. I give them advice. I help shape it. It's my design, it's my expertise. It's all of these things that I charge money for, not what lands on the floor. So I just want to make that very clear. I never charge less and never get in the habit of charging half haircuts, because why would anybody want to pay the full price then, right? So another thing that a few key points that I think are really important when somebody grows their hair out. Number one is I always ask them, what are they growing their hair out to? Because it matters how I cut their hair. For example, if they're growing their hair out evenly and they want it maybe down to here, or they're growing their hair out really, really short here and a long top, or they're going to keep it tapered along here and just grow this area out. All of those different haircuts, I'm going to cut differently as I grow the hair out, right? So just keep that in mind. It's very important that you ask them where they go. A couple other things that I explain to clients, especially if they've never grown their hair out, is a few things. I always tell them that when the hair is really short and they're used to short hair, they're used to a very, what I call, static shape. Static means that it doesn't move. So how I cut the hair is how the hair is going to live. The longer the hair gets from the head, the more sway, the more possibility, the more curl pattern, the more frizz, the more whatever you want to call it. So I just tell them that as that hair gets longer, you have to kind of get comfortable with just letting hair be hair. You have to change your product, because a lot of times if you're working on short hair, you're using a puck like this, where it's a little bit heavier of a hold. But again, if you have hair and it's kind of growing out, you don't want a heavy, heavy hold. So you have to move more into a cream or a lotion or something softer to just let the hair be hair. So I tend to warn people what they're getting into so that they can kind of, once they get there, a lot of people get really attached to the end goal. And what that means is, oh, I want hair. And then they hate every step along the way. I try to tell them, keep getting your haircut so you enjoy the process and you enjoy the journey of growing your hair out. And I think that's really important. And then let me see if I have all my points. Change the product, explain the shape. The last thing that I didn't go over. So when they grow their hair out, again, I try to explain to them the journey, right? So let's say he gets his hair cut and he's used to getting it cut every 2 or 3 weeks. I will tell him next time wait 4 weeks, then 5 weeks, then 6 weeks, and then kind of keep going out a little bit to give me a little bit more time. As the hair gets longer, you tend to need to cut a little bit less. Then once they get to 8 weeks, I tell them pretty much everybody just maintain about 8 weeks, because anything longer, it's just going to lose shape. When you just let hair grow and you don't touch it at all, it takes shape of the head, which is round, and you end up with a really, really round shape. And you can kind of see back here, it's happening a little bit. So what I did was I pre-cut this first half of the hair. So I already cut this side. Can we repeat it? There we go. I cut this side, but you can see that this side is it's very straight, it's very flat. If we were to keep growing this and he wouldn't come in and get his haircut from me, then this area just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And we've kind of all seen that mullety effect where the length starts becoming unison. it starts becoming one length, and this gets really bulky and big back here. Another reason that I wanted to point out why I pre-cut this hair is I wanted to show you a little bit of the design and the weight distribution. So what that means is so on this side, if you look at the uncut hair, this haircut, if you just kind of generally look at it from a macro level, your eye tends to draw to this area. This area is where a lot of the heavy weight lives, right? We want to push that weight differently, and we want to push it back up into here. And you can see because the weight is here, it looks flatter in here. So we want to redistribute that weight, and you can see over here that now your eye isn't necessarily drawn to here. The heaviest point of the weight is right in here. And we want to push that up into this. I did not touch this at all. So you can imagine how, because you can see this is all the same length, even though it doesn't necessarily even look bulky in here. But that's what I mean is like in here, you can see the weight is about right here. This is kind of where I stopped, and I didn't really touch this. And then in here, you can see that. So it's like the less you touch it, the more the weight drops, and you still want to elevate that weight up into the top region, if that makes sense, right? You with me? All right, so so you can see here again, the weight displacement is right in here, and we want to remove that bulk to push the weight up into that side. And you can see how it's done that on this side, right? So the heaviest point is in here, which is where we want it, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do is continue on with this other side. I want your eye to pay attention to where or how that weight gets redistributed. So right now I'm going to push it up into here, up here I'm going to push it up into here, up here I'm going to push it up into here. So I want that line, that weight distribution to kind of drop. Again, I haven't touched this hair at all. So as his hair grows out, I need more and more length in here, which is why I only want an extra week. And then the longer it gets and I get the shape to where I want it to be, then I allow it to go that full 8 weeks. Okay. So I'm going to clip her over comb. Just as a precursor to what I did here is I actually did this with shears, and then I just outlined with the clipper. In the back, I did a little bit more clipper work just because it got so short up in here. I'm going to do clipper work up into here, and then I'll replicate what I did over here. And it's really a combination, and that's, you know, when you really learn fundamentals and you really learn the strong points of shear work and the strong points of clipper works, you're able to combine them where needed. And sometimes I do both in one haircut. So for example, shear, clipper, clipper, shear, clipper, right? So I'm going to continue on with what I did. Somebody asked me in my comment section that how I choose shear over clipper. And, you know, the region that he's from is the Middle East, which a lot of times, not all, but a lot of times it has a lot of texture to it. He has a nice wave pattern and a nice curl, but you can see that that wave is pretty loose because when you cut that short, the wave disappears as it has on the lower half. So, but you can also see these little hairs kind of sticking out. It's wanting to start curling, but there's just that little bit of frizz. So sometimes the really frizzy hair is when I shy away from a clipper, and I'll show you why, is because I lost my comb. Here it is. When I go over and over and over and over something like this, that's what kind of almost like makes the hair freak out a little bit. And then that's where it takes a little bit of time to kind of live in itself again. Some hair does really, really well when you cut it, and it just kind of is, I call it happy hair. But sometimes when you go over and over and over something, it freaks out. And that's when I shy away from using a clipper, because you are kind of going over and over it. And the more you cut it, the more frizzy it gets. So I'm going to use the shear work over here. But back here, because I'm only cutting kind of this region, I'm fine with the clipper. And he's about in the middle. If it was any frizzier than this, I would probably just use as much shear work as I could. But I'm going to, again, I want your eye to really watch that weight distribution and how it changes as I cut it. And I want to push that weight up into the center. But then if I go too high and I start cutting here, then it's gonna push it back down here visually. And then here it tends to widen out on him, and I want to kind of push that weight up and push it up into that center and get rid of all of this bulk in here. This is where our work is so satisfying, seeing all that hair. I do find a lot of people get a longer left side, especially if you're right-handed. So just kind of remember that you're dropping this down, but then you kind of got to get that weight back up into that parietal ridge as you move around the head. And of course, I don't have a water bottle, but this is where I would use one. Let me see if this side is easier to, we'll continue on this side. So, so I kind of, in my mind, stopped right here. I'm going to clean some of this up with shear work, and hopefully you can see some of that. You can see how it's a little rattled and frizzled. So as the hair grows out, I still want to create really clean lines because, again, I want to create a solid shape so that as it grows out, it's really, it grows out a little bit easier. And you probably can't see this, but it's not too many sections. Sometimes the curlier the hair, the harder it is for people to find those sections, but the more critical and crucial it becomes. So just remember that you really want to use clean lines. If the hair is really straight, it's easy to use straight lines, but that's actually when sometimes I go to soften some of those lines. So you can see the weight is back up in here. I'm just going to kind of make sure that it's clean. Okay. Now I'm going to take the weight out through the bottom with the clipper over comb. Yeah.
Jose Fernandez wants to know, what do you think about guys with really thick hair? Is it easy to cut?
I mean, at this point in my career, I just love hair. I just love all hair. I think for me, what it is it's easy in the sense that the haircut almost always looks good because it can get lost. Like the lines don't necessarily show up. But for me, what it is about hair is I want to highlight its best attributes. So some hair, if it's really black, I love highlighting the fact that it's black. If it's really thick, I kind of like highlighting the fact that it's thick. If it's thin, I guess I like to make it look a little bit thicker. But I like highlighting its attributes in its best ways. So is it easier? Sometimes. It depends on the hair's wave and how it lays. I think the hardest hair is when you have to kind of get creative in a sense, and you have to create something, like for example, the hair goes forward this way and back that way, and you have to kind of make it look even, but you technically cut it even and then it doesn't look even. I think that's the hardest hair to cut because you're having to kind of pull two different haircuts together in order to make one cohesive one.
Fellow named Henry wants to know if he holds the comb flat against the scalp, about what number guard would it be equivalent to?
2. So, and I say 2 as the removable blades. So if I put a 2 removable blade on here like this, so I have to say I don't know guards as well, but if I put a adjustable or a removable blade number 2 and went up the side of the scalp, and then I went like this with full pressure with a number 1 and a clipper comb, this equals about a 2. And then anything over a 2, I always do clipper over comb. Anything under a 2, I tend to do more of the blade work, if that helps. And here's a good example of technically I went through, but visually I want to kind of clean this up. So you can see his hair grows this way, then it kind of grows in a circle, then it goes horizontal this way. So if you want to save length, you can cut hair with it. If you want to cut hair shorter, you go against it. So watch, if I go down, it doesn't cut that much, but if I go this way, it does. So sometimes if you have a circle, you kind of almost have to go in a circle. And then one trick to that too is if you're working in a smaller space with smaller areas, use smaller amount of your clipper and smaller amount of your comb. So when I'm going and removing weight, I'm using full amount of weight reduction with the full amount of my tools. But when I get into detailed areas, I just use less of it. Just use that edge. If that makes sense. I keep saying that. That makes sense. And then I'm going to edge this out, and then I'm not going to do a lot of work on the top because I don't need to. And again, he's growing his hair out. I'm more interested in just kind of creating a better shape. So sometimes that means taking a lot off, and sometimes that means taking a little off. So here again, I'm not shy about kind of restructuring that neckline to push it inward to narrow it. But I want to take that edge off to soften it. Here's a little trick too. If you hold the comb like this with the thumb, that was revolutionary for me. And then I do want to make sure that I get his ears. I think it's an important part of the service. Sometimes I wax them, or if I do wax them, I charge more money for it. And then usually what I'll do, even if I don't do a beard trim, I'll just clean up this line for them right here. If I do an actual beard trim where I charge more money, I would go in fully. I would create the line in through here. You usually want to find where that chin is, go down. You could bring in the line wherever you want in here. You can straight razor it. You can do a lot of things, but the idea is that you want to outline it. But even if I don't do that, it's still, to me, an extra part of the service that I just want to add on and make sure that, again, my dollar amount is valuable and worth it for them. And you can see, and a lot of times when people grow their hair out, this is the first thing that bothers them. And in order to get this top longer, if you think about it this way too, let's say he's growing his hair out, and right now I came up to here. Next time I'll come to here. Next time I'll come to here and just edge this out. Make sure that you're not edging it out so that you're redistributing the weight and pushing all the weight in through here though. So be careful with that. And then when I get to the top area, I'm just going to kind of connect that top. As always, I'm going to go right down the middle with no water bottle, of course. That would be too easy. Más preguntas? Any more questions?
So Andy Garcia wants to know about using a light color comb, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I apologize. Somebody asked me to, and I should have on this one. I know the dark on dark is hard to see. But yeah, sometimes I do own a white comb. I just didn't bring it with me. So yes, I like using, gray is my favorite because then I can kind of use it on everybody's hair, but they don't really have a, one thing I will say though, and this is more for my women audience, be careful with the colors. If you're using a bright colored pink comb and you say you're specialized in men's hair, just make sure that you realize that if a man's feeling down and you're saying, hey, I cut men's hair and I'm going to give you a masculine cut, and then you're cutting with a pink comb or a neon green comb, sometimes it's a little, I mean, to be quite blunt, I think it's a little tacky. So if you use these more neutral colors or more sophisticated colors, I think you're catering to a broader audience, not your own not your own self, but your audience. So I do like colored combs, but I do like neutral color combs. We actually put it in our policy handbook that you can't use pink, leopard, zebra, nothing like that. I think it's it's, you're just not going to see $100 haircut with a zebra print anything. You know what I mean? So just be careful and make sure that the tools that you use are sophisticated and they're great tools. That's actually one of my favorite thing about men's hair cutting is I don't need a lot of tools. When I originally started in this industry, I was going to be a makeup artist, and I felt like I was going crazy because I would put something down and then could never find it. One thing I want to point out too, on the other side, I wasn't cutting hardly anything off, and on this side, I'm cutting a little corner. It's really common to find a longer left side because most right-handed people will create a longer left side. And it's kind of just physics unless you really kind of break down what and how you're cutting that side. So a lot of times, especially when I'm working with younger stylists, is they get nervous if they don't cut a little on this side and then the other side, it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't match up. Just know that that may not be your haircut or your fault, and you're actually evening it out. So just kind of pay attention. One thing to build your confidence on that, though, is when you're consulting with them in the very beginning, pull that hair out and see if it's uneven. So that when you get to the side, like, oh, wow, I need to take off more on this side. So that will kind of help you. And then through the top, I'm not going to take much. Again, he's growing his hair out. I'm charging him full price. I'm not going to not touch it at all. But what I'm going to do is make sure that the angle is okay. You can see how his hair collapses in through here. I want to push that weight out. He has his hair tends to build up in the middle really easily. So I want to make sure that I'm not cutting this corner off over on the side. And this is kind of more part of the design. But as the hair gets longer and longer, that's okay. And again, it's like filing your nails. I mean, if you file your nail, well, you guys probably, everybody wants longer nails, but if you file them, you're just trimming them up. You don't have to go take a lot off, but it's still going to help him grow his hair out a lot better. So you can see on this side, what I'm doing is I'm pushing the weight out. So what was existing right here is now existing right here. So I'll show you what I mean again. So right now the weight is right here. As I cut that off, I'm now pushing that weight out a little further to the left. And that's what I want. I'm backed up against the screen. And now I have a black shirt, so look brilliant. But you can see there's a little bit right there I'm taking off. And again, it's like filing his nails, it's just going to grow a little bit better. It's going to grow out a little bit cleaner. It's going to look good. And then you can see in the back, I'm not going to cut a lot. You can still see I want more length in here. I want to make sure that, so next time I brought the weight up to here, next time I'm going to have this more weight in here, I'm going to bring it down to here. Then as it grows out, it's just going to maybe be tapered, or maybe at some point I'm going to let it go. He did show me the picture that he wants to grow it too, and it's more or less just longer and kind of even. But even if it's quote unquote even, hair is an illusion. And when you have the illusion of hair, even if it's quote unquote even, you still typically want a little bit more length on the top. And the reason is just because you want your eye to be elongated. This is a side note, this could go well or not, but they were showing me typography on letters, and somebody was creating a whole new alphabet, and there's interesting trickery to the lettering system. For example, on the S, it's always a little bit narrower on the top than it is on the bottom. It looks visually even, but the way that the S is drawn, it's not as even as you think. And it's trickery to the eye. And the same thing happens for hair. Hair is an illusion. So how you design it is how the eye receives it. And so you want the eye to draw to a higher place. You want it to be elongated. That's why I will always create a straight line here, but not here. And so hair is an illusion. And so you're designing something in a higher aesthetic means that you understand design a little bit better. So again, if he's my client, as it grows out, even I'm not going to tell him all this. I just know in my head how I'm going to shape it a little bit differently so that as it grows out, it looks really good. Because what you don't want is that you don't want to just never see your client again just because he's growing his hair out, right? And then the other thing you don't want is his hair looking really bad while he grows it out, but he still calls you his hair cutter or his stylist or his barber. So just the other thing that's really helpful for them and for you is that you develop a plan for them. So what I would say to him is, great, I love that you're growing it out. I need to clean up those edges so that it looks really good while you grow it out. Normally you wait 4 weeks, then I'll have you wait 5, then 6, then we'll get to 8 weeks, and then I'll maintain your hair every week, 8 weeks, because we don't want your hair to get round, and I want to help you through the journey to make it look really good. When I give him a plan like that, all of a sudden he's going to keep coming back, and he's not going to go to anybody else because you have a plan for him. And that's how you create value for yourself. And when they think about, I need a haircut, I think about Amanda, or I think about whoever else, because you have that plan and he doesn't want to explain that plan to other people. Okay. So, I would probably blow dry this just a little bit. I am going to use a product like this today. It is shiny again because of his dark, thick hair. We are on camera, so I'm using a little bit higher shine than I normally would in real life. But I'm going to show him that I put it all over my hands. I rub it in my hands like this. Then I rub it through the hair all over evenly. And then one other thing that you can help your client with understand that as they grow their hair out is that sometimes they need to wash it a little bit less as it grows out as well, right? So sometimes when their hair is really short, they can wash it every day, but it's not going to get frizzy. But the longer it gets, the more distance it gets from the head, the oils don't reach as far. So just explain stuff to them like that. I always say that this seems so obvious to us because we're around it every day, but it's kind of like when I went to go to the hardware store and I wanted to switch a light. This is an embarrassing story, but it gives you the point is there. So I go to the hardware store and I said, hey, I want to switch my light and make a dimmer out of it. And they said, okay, no problem. All you have to do is just unscrew this. And when you do that, then you're able to, do this, switch it out, and voila, you have this light. I'm like, great. So I go home. I did exactly what he told me, but he never told me to shut the power off. So I electrocuted myself all the way down to my toe. And the point is it was obvious to him to shut the power off. And he used words like, all you have to do and just do this. But to me, it wasn't obvious because I don't like that stuff and I don't have a history of knowing anything about it. And most of our clients aren't that savvy with their hair. So I teach them what seems to be obvious to me is amazing. One of the biggest things that I point out to people is that their hair actually grows forward. People are like, wow, nobody's ever told me that. It's like how a hygienist finally told me how to brush my teeth and I was 32 years old or something. All right. How are we looking, Mo?
I can't see myself.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, it's great. Let me tell you. It looks good. Okay. So wipe his face off a little bit. And then as his hair gets longer, his curls are going to get bigger. And they're about the size of a marker. I mean, it's a beautiful curl, and we want that curl to show itself. If you cut his hair too short, all of a sudden, there's no more curl. So again, back to that question is I just really like to highlight hair. All right, my dear. All set. Thank you. Okay. So I guess I didn't say in the beginning what I was going to talk about today, but again, my little words of wisdom hopefully help you out to grow yourself, to grow your business, and to grow yourself as a human in general. So I have, is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have, I've coached a lot of people along the way. I still coach today. I have a staff. I have people that I mentor, and I'm an educator. And so I say this with confidence because I have been coached a lot. And when I first started, a lot of the coaching was in hair. And as I've moved through, it's been more in business. So now that I own a salon and I have multiple salons, and now I'm I'm being coached by business. And when I was younger, I was coached as an athlete. And so coaches just kind of make sense to me. And because I've had really, really great mentors along the way, it's allowed me to proudly say that I mentor people as well. And one of the things that I find is that the best mentors, when I was younger and I was an athlete, and I think about the coaches, they really taught me kind of life lessons. And those life lessons really allowed me to think about those things, not only in athletics, when I was swimming or when I was running, but then I would bring it into my business or I would bring it into haircutting. It taught me certain disciplines that, it's just about life. Life is practice, right? So, what I want to share with you today is that um, the difference between advice and opinion. And this was a big aha moment for me. And I start recognizing it now that it's been pointed out to me. So I want to point it out to you. What that means is advice is something where somebody gives you advice and it's because they've had that experience themselves. They're ahead of you in life. They've already been around that bend and they know what they're talking about, or they're an expertise in what they do. And the key here is that you respect them. So even if they had a business, but that business failed, maybe that's not advice, right? But maybe they have a business and they're very successful at what they do. That is advice. Okay. The opinion is that of someone who doesn't necessarily know what they're talking about. They want to help you out, but they've never owned a business. So you should try this, or you should do this, or you should do that. That is all opinion. And it's not that opinions aren't welcomed, but you have to be able to discern the difference between advice and opinion. Okay. And I even started finding this in professional environments. For example, I called a lawyer one time and I asked the lawyer about a law question, and he kept answering me about business, how to grow the business. Well, if you get into that business, it's not, there's going to be hardship and there's going to be this and there's going to be that. But I didn't ask him about business. I asked him about law. Same thing with accountants. Sometimes I ask them about a break-even point, or I need to know the number on something, or I need to know the margin. And they answer me with how to grow my business and where I should put the money and how, things like that. And it's like, unless they've actually grown a business, their expertise is in accounting. And that's the questions you need to ask them. If somebody's grown a business, you need to ask them that. So what I would say to you is go find somebody who's already grown a business, a healthy business, somebody you respect, and ask them for advice and ask them for things. And here's the other key with that. You have to know when to talk up and when to talk down. So we're all on this journey of life. There's people ahead of you and there's people behind you, and then there's your peers, right? When you're talking up and you are listening to somebody with advice, do just that. Listen. Listen to what they have to say. Don't tell them anything because you don't need to tell them anything. They already know, right? What you want to do is ask really smart questions. Ask the questions of where you're at, but ask them how to get there. That is advice. When you talk to your peers, you talk about ideas. You combat. You have a camaraderie. Say, well, what do you think about this? Well, what do you think about this? Well, what do you think about this? And you want to idea dump with each other. When you're talking to somebody below you, so maybe somebody that is looking up to you now because they've just started and your business is a little bit healthier, then you want to tell them. Then you want to coach them. Then you want to give them advice. Because again, we're all in a different journey and we're always going to be there. There's always someone ahead of you and there's always someone below you just starting out. So my advice to you is to make sure that you know when to talk up and when to coach below you and when you're talking to your peer. Because when you discern that difference, all of a sudden you have a lot more information at your fingertips. And then one other thing, and this is kind of a side note, but when you're coaching somebody below you, don't just tell them, don't just get mad at them, or don't just say whatever. Just help guide them along the way, but also allow them to fail. That's just kind of a side note. One last thought on this is when just remain a student through this journey as well. Because I remember when I first opened my salon and I was really excited about it and I knew absolutely nothing. I had a friend who was really successful in business who gave me a lot of advice and I just wouldn't listen. I was so like, yeah, but, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about because I'm in a different industry or I'm doing this or I'm doing that. But here's the thing. Fast forward a decade, I crave his advice. I wish I would have listened a lot sooner. And now I hang on to every word that he's willing to tell me. Okay, so just make sure that you really pay attention and you remain a student of life because this is all a journey and it's all just practice. So that's all I have, unless you guys have any other questions. Make sure you type in your city and make sure you type in your country because I'm putting my little pin board together and all love is good love. Oh, I'll show you the pin board right now. And then that's really all I got. So we have a few more countries. We got Kazakhstan and Iran and Turkey and Asia and the Philippines and Brazil and Mexico. And so we're getting there. Africa, you got to show us love. All right, guys. Until next time.